So yeah, let me tell you about Portsmouth, a literary and pictorial tour, which is a genuine labour of love, but also something that I'm genuinely proud of. Over the years, I've read about 75 novels and other works which have descriptions of Portsmouth in by about 50 different authors, including the likes of H.G. Wells, Rudyard Kipling, Conan Doyle, Jane Austen, Beatrix Potter, Neville Shute. Even Mahatma Gandhi writes about coming to Portsmouth and having an extraordinary time here. So it's really fascinating stuff. And I'd also collected loads of engravings and pictures and postcards of Portsmouth over the years. And I realised that I could take you on a tour of Portsea Island and Portsmouth through the eyes of all of these different writers, giving extracts from their works and putting them next to pictures that I've got. And that's what I do. I start us off at the top of Portsdown Hill, and then I go down through the island, and all the while, as I'm doing this, I'm quoting from the authors, giving pictures of the places that they're describing, but also adding in historical notes, like how the hot wars got their name, why St. Jago the monkey was famous on the Common Hard in the 18th century, why Lawrence of Arabia was here in the 1920s. Really great fun like this. And so I just take you on a tour through the island, and then I also weave in personal anecdotes about living here as well. So there's some fun, there's some joy, and some great writing by all sorts. Probably some of the greatest writers of the Victorian era, for sure, had connections with Portsmouth. So obviously Charles Dickens was born here. I mentioned H.G. Wells. He worked in a drapery emporium here. Arthur Conan Doyle lived here for 8 years, working as a GP, and this is where he created Sherlock Holmes and also developed his love of spiritualism and his interest in spiritualism. It's quite interesting that the same year that A Study in Scarlet came out, which was his first Sherlock Holmes novel with the arch rationalist Sherlock Holmes, was the very same year that he announced himself to believe in ghosts and fairies and all sorts of strange and unusual phenomena. So that's a really fascinating thing, and that's what I really love about the writers who've come to Portsmouth. They surprise you time and time again with the stories they have to tell, and also their beautiful descriptions of the town. So yeah, that's what I did with Portsmouth, the Literary and Pictorial Tour. So the book has 37 different sections within it, sort of short, sharp introductions and descriptions of different areas, starting at the top of Portsdown Hill and ending up at the Great Saltons on the eastern side of the island. And all the while, all the way through, what you can do is you can weave your way and follow the tour. It has maps at the back of the book, so you can weave your way and follow the maps all the way down to Old Portsmouth, then through Southsea, and then up the other side of the island, finding out what all these writers said about stuff. And it's really, really joyous. You've got so many different things in there. You've got mentions of Southsea Castle and how it was stormed during the Civil War. You've got the Schneider Trophy, which was a air speed competition that happened in 1929 and 1931 in Portsmouth, or off of Portsmouth over the Solent. And each one of these events draws in different and interesting people. Mahatma Gandhi came here, for example, and he writes about this in his autobiography, Experiments with Truth, to go to a vegetarian conference whilst he was a young legal student in London. And his story is really quite amusing, because what happens is that he comes to Portsmouth and stays at a boarding house with a friend of his and is invited to play bridge in the evening. And the hostess of the boarding house is something of a dropper of innuendos. And his friend, it turns out, is also a master of innuendo. So you have this kind of carry-on moment between these two. The young Mahatma Gandhi gets absolutely inflamed with passion and goes to make a move on this woman. His friend says to him, "What is this devil that's got into you?" and sends him away and says, "No, get you to bed," which he does. And then when he's in bed, he just can't get to sleep because he's just thinking about this woman, and his passions have been aroused. And when he finally does get to sleep, his dreams are not at all repeatable. The next day he leaves, and he says that Portsmouth taught him a lesson. And that big lesson was that in his spiritual practice, he would also need to incorporate his sexuality. And this was a major turning point for him about his understanding of himself. So it's quite interesting that you have these very different looks at what Portsmouth meant to people and to different authors. So yeah, on that level, it's really, really good fun. The thing that's great about this book is if you want to explore Portsmouth, if you're a visitor to the town or if you're somebody who's local, you can do it through the eyes of loads of different writers and really, really great writers as well as some quite obscure ones as well. And what that does is it gives you a really fun and enjoyable way of getting to know the town and getting to know the history without having to get overly bogged down in too many details and too many facts, although it does have a lot of details and facts within it. But you also get some great writing from these authors as well. So it's a very enjoyable way to absorb the town. And that's really why I wrote it, was to give people this kind of really positive sense of oh wow, Portsmouth did this. You know, there was all of this stuff going on in Portsmouth. And interestingly enough, I gave a talk last night to a group of people via Zoom. And that was exactly their response. They just said, we had no idea that there were so many things and people with stories to tell in Portsmouth, and that it had this kind of literary pedigree, which is rarely mentioned, because the main thing that is mentioned about Portsmouth really is the Navy. And so you get this completely other side and other way of telling the story of the town. And that's what you get from the book, really.